What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Kicks and Picks podcast. We are here on the international break, but the show does not stop there. We're going to take you guys through all of the storylines in the Premier League and Serie A leading up to this point. Might even talk a little bit about the international fixtures. Coach Steve not able to make it tonight, so we have found a very capable replacement. You guys know him as the host of the InterViews podcast, Gianni Paterno at Sauce GMP on Twitter. Gianni, thank you so much for joining us. Long overdue. We've had Alex on. You guys have had us onto your show. We are delighted for you to let your football knowledge shine here with us tonight.
No, man, I appreciate the invite. I mean, I will say I'm a little offended that Alessandro got an invite before me, but you know what? I won't hold it against you guys. So I'm just
If you
excited to be here.
recall, you couldn't make it, so he filled in your spot, but we won't
Yeah,
get
but
into
I
the,
would have.
the
You should have
details.
just skipped him. I'm kidding. I love Ale. So
Yeah, and if you guys haven't checked that show out, I'm guessing if you're listening to us, you probably listened to them at some point. Awesome show, awesome guys. So we're going to put your football
I
knowledge to the
appreciate it.
test. Scotty, let's get the bullshit out of the way. We had a disaster of a week last week, 1-9. Everything went against us. We took some trap lines 2 weeks in a row. 2 weeks ago, we made it out okay. This last week didn't go in our favor. We got trapped.
Yeah, I mean, credit to us for talking about it on an off week when we could have just buried it and never addressed it and gone on with our
Nope.
lives. But we'll
Nope.
address the elephant in the room. I mean, uh, only I can go 0-3 while betting three of the top four clubs in England to win. Somehow they all found a way to either lose or draw. So maybe I have the mush right now. I'm gonna have to figure out a way to recover from this because it was a kind of an upsetting weekend for the three of us.
Yeah, listen, if we're going to brag about our good weeks, we got to be honest about the bad ones, right? And it lives out there for everybody to hear. So no running away from it. But you talked about the Premier League. Let's just get right into it because crazy weekend. Things are starting to shape themselves out. They're starting to get shook up a little bit. We have Tottenham. They spent the first 10 match weeks with at least a share of first place since I think we take credit for this on the show. We've bet them back-to-back weeks. They lost in back-to-back weeks. Last week in a stoppage time collapse at Wolves, all the way down to fourth in the table. So the question, and it's not the first time we've asked it this year, but I want to get Johnny's thoughts. We're going to do a buy or sell. Buying or selling Tottenham can steady the ship, finish in the top five, aka Champions League qualification.
yeah, no, I'm gonna go ahead and buy that. Just looking at their roster, I like the way Ange has them playing. I think he's utilizing a lot of guys that Antonio Conte. Well, he didn't have the opportunity to work with Destiny Udoji, but I think that he's getting the best out of a lot of his reinforcement players. I mean, James Madison, you could make an argument for him being like signing of the season there. So, yeah, no, I love what they're doing. I'm not the biggest Vicario fan. I mean, I think Nick, my thoughts on that, where I had issues with his rebound control. It seems like he's got that kind of figured out so far at Tottenham. But top five, if that really is what it takes for the UCL in there. I mean, I don't see them. I mean, right now they're only 2 points out of first. I don't see them fading. I don't know if they'll win the league. Maybe, but I could see them easily getting top four, no problem with the way he's got them playing. It's definitely an exciting brand of football, and he's getting a lot out of guys that not a lot was too much expected out of Destiny and Madison. I mean, we knew what we saw with him with Leicester, but yeah, very excited with the way they're playing.
Yeah, I guess I'll take the counterpoint for that. So I'll sell this. I do agree. I think Postecoglou has done a really good job with Tottenham. I think that's the good news for Spurs fans right now is it seems like they finally found their manager after a few painful trial and errors with some of the bigger names in Europe. But Ange has certainly got them playing in an attractive way that has been getting them plenty of results. I'm selling it because I think the Chelsea game. There's been a lot made of what they lost there. It wasn't just the points, but they lost Madison to injury. They lost Mickey Van de Ven, who's been a great center half for them all season long. To it seems like it'll be a couple months of a hamstring injury, and as you guys know, hamstring injuries tend to linger. So that might be something that he has to deal with just for the rest of the season. And so I think there's going to be concerns around whether the depth that they have can, replicate the success that starting 11 has seen through the first 10 matches of the season. The other concern I have is, we talk about AFCON a lot, but there's also the Asia Cup where that also takes place in January. And so Son's going to be
Okay.
gone for 3 or 4 matches in January. So I think, without Madison probably in January, without Son, Richarlison, even though he hasn't done much this season, he's just had knee surgery, so he's probably not going to be available. They're going to have some pretty thin attacking options for a good 6-week period there. And that's really what the strength of their early success was backed off of, right? They scored 2+ goals in pretty much every one of their first 9 matches. So I think with that offensive, maybe weakness, they might see some points getting dropped, whether it's 1-1 draws or even losses. I think that's enough to kind of drop them down a bit. And then you look at the people who are behind her, or the teams that are behind them. I think Newcastle, they're also dealing with their own injury crisis, but they have that checkbook that can be opened up in January that can paper over a lot of the cracks. So I think they'll be challenging. I think United have kind of found their form a little bit in England. Certainly had a lot of early season struggles, but they're now in 6th place, 21 points, so just 5 points behind Tottenham, which is pretty surprising given how strong Tottenham started the season and how poorly United started the season. And then you've got the wild cards. Aston Villa and Brighton have been pretty strong to start the season. Brighton, we know what they were capable of all last season, and De Zerbi certainly has them playing well. They've lost a lot of players, and their results in the last couple of matches, I think they haven't won in 5 or 6 weeks. So that's certainly a little bit of a struggle. But Aston Villa, they've been strong. They score a lot. Ollie Watkins, we're big fans of him on this podcast.
Oh yeah.
They've got some decent players that can help compete. So I think Tottenham are certainly gonna have their work cut out for them. I'm gonna sell it just because I think their depth right now is gonna have to really step up. And the miracles that Postecoglou has done so far has been certainly encouraging, but there's only so much you can ask of the man. So that's where I'm at with Tottenham right now.
Yeah, I'm somewhere in between the two of you. I think Gianni's absolutely right. The signings have been outstanding. I wasn't all that high on Madison coming in, right? I thought that was just like an okay move at the time, but he's been outstanding. Vicario, you mentioned his shot stopping is, it's making the difference. It's made the difference in a lot of early games this year. But Scott's right. I didn't even consider the Asia Cup. That's a
Yeah, I
fantastic
forgot
point.
about that too.
So wasn't even on my radar, but I think, we have to look, right? City, Liverpool, Arsenal are ahead of them. I think those 3 are pretty much locks for the top 4 at this point in time. So now, as you mentioned, Scotty, you got 5 teams fighting for 2 spots. You mentioned depth. I don't know how Villa's depth looks. I don't really know how Brighton's depth looks. United, 7 wins, 5 losses. If any of those losses turn into draws, all of a sudden they're kind of in the mix, despite, as you mentioned, right, us perceiving them as having a terrible year or a terrible start to the year. So can they hold on without reinforcements? I really don't know, but their defensive record through 12 games gives me hope. I'm more inclined to buy it than I am to sell it, just because I think all of these teams are going to go through similar struggles, right? You got Brighton, who doesn't have a win in their last 5. Um, Newcastle treading water. So it's going to come down to, I think, some of the big head-to-head matchups. And so far, Tottenham's done okay, right? Got that win against Liverpool. I'm pretty sure they played Arsenal well. I'm struggling to recall game by game, but they've been in the thick of it. And, 12 games to me is enough of a sample size to say that they're going to stick around. They're going to give it a go. I mean, I don't see them finishing worse than 6th. So I'm a little more inclined to buy it.
Yeah, I think it might actually come down to just those last 2 months of the season, which it so often does, right? When you have a little bit more parity in the Premier League now, similar to kind of what we see in Serie A. Um, I think having a strong, final 6, 7, 8 weeks, that can be the difference. And if they, are down by, 3 or 4 points, they can make up a lot of ground. So I think they'll struggle in this middle period, the holiday period. And then it's just a matter of kind of regrouping. And once it gets to March and making that charge.
All right, fair enough. Let's talk about another team, City. They have been the title favorites for what feels like the last 10 years. I think this year they're looking a little more vulnerable, maybe than in seasons past. 4 goals conceded last week to Chelsea and Scott's Bet the Mortgage game. They've dropped a point in 25% of the matches so far this year. So 12 games, 1 draw, 2 losses. Buy or sell, the field can pull off a Premier League title upset. So that's any team outside of Manchester City.
Man, it's hard to bet against Man City and the way Pep has them playing. Yes, it hasn't been the greatest start and it hasn't been the prettiest brand, especially giving up 4 goals to Chelsea, who is a club I just love ripping on. So to see that end in a draw was definitely not the most I guess the prettiest way for a match to end. So it was a little bit disappointing in that regard. I would have bet on them if I could have as well. I would have put the house on it. So I guess I am going to lean more towards the field. Liverpool are strong, and even though Salah's going to leave in January as well for the AFCON,
Yep.
they do have depth up front. They are able to interchange those forwards. Arsenal's been a strong team as well, even though they've dropped points to clubs they probably shouldn't be dropping points to. But only 1 loss in the league, I think, is always going to be good for you if you can just continue to eke out draws if you have to. And then, like we said, Tottenham, they're only 2 points back. Villa's had a solid start, and so yeah, I would lean more towards the field, although it'd be hard really to bet against Man City.
Yeah, I think this season really does seem like a year for one of these other clubs to step up and make a good faith challenge on it. Liverpool certainly looked really strong. Had a few results go against them. The Tottenham loss was a big one. That one kind of was a little unfortunate, but it's going to be telling. Coming out of break, Manchester City and Liverpool are facing each other, and I think that match is going to tell us a lot about what the direction of Man City is going to be probably for the next couple of months. They will get Kevin De Bruyne back at some point closer to the end of this calendar year. We all know what he can bring and how important he is to Manchester City or really any club. Honestly, he's that kind of a player. So the question for me is, how does Liverpool cope without Salah? Last season, I think we were kind of critical of him and what he was and wasn't doing when Liverpool struggled pretty much all season long. This season, there's been no doubt he's been, absolutely the player that he's been for Liverpool the 4 or 5 years leading up to that, scoring and assisting in pretty much every match. So his loss will be felt. It's going to be up to Nunez to really get a bit more consistent with his finishing. Jota has been great the last few weeks, so he'll have to step up, and then hopefully Diaz and Gakpo can stay healthy, because then that should be enough to kind of weather the storm. Arsenal should be pretty poised to continue their challenge based off of last season. I know, the results weren't super convincing to start the season, but that's sometimes how you have to, make your title run is to grind out those wins when you aren't playing your best. So if they can get healthy, obviously they're dealing with some injuries on their own. They should certainly be well poised to make that charge. So I think I'm inclined to buy the field in this one. We also know historically it's very hard to three-peat in the Premier League. So I think that's also kind of going up against City. So I'll buy the field for now. But if Kevin De Bruyne comes back and looks super refreshed and ready to go for the last 3 or 4 months of the season, having sat out basically every match since September, then I'll be concerned, because at that point you can't bet against City with that attack.
Yeah. 2 ways to look at it. So I'm going to buy this because I think if somebody's going to take down City, this is the year to do it for all the reasons both of you guys mentioned. But if you're looking at if you're a club in the top 3, top 4, top 5, you're saying, okay, City hasn't looked invincible. This is great. Shit, they're still in first place.
Yeah.
Or are you looking at it saying, hey, we're only 1 point back of City, 12 games in. You mentioned Arsenal. They're particularly intriguing to me because they haven't looked nearly as good as they did last year. They only have 1 loss. Liverpool, we talk about them week in and week out. Their depth in the midfield and up front is the best in the league. So that will continue to carry them. They also amazingly have only given up 10 goals. I think that's like incredible when you consider
they have the best keeper in Europe, but
he
may not get
that's what I was getting
for
to. Some of the defenders they've trotted out there, that's a miracle, but Allison's been awesome. So I feel like you have to have the hope and the belief if you're sitting, with 20 points or more that City has not run away with this league yet, drop points in 3 games. But are you going to ever bet against City? Are you ever going to bet against Pep? Haaland hasn't even really gotten going in the league yet. So that's, to me, the scariest thing that's still in front of us. Because he's proven it, right? Every year of his career, every competition he's played in, this guy scores goals. So if he goes on a streak where he scores in 5 straight games, that's 5 games that City probably isn't losing. So that's what worries me a little bit. But I think these teams have done a good job of beating up on each other so far that we could put our faith and we could put some stock in the Liverpool and Arsenal, Tottenham taking the league down this year.
Yeah, and I think the point I'll kind of end on why I think it might be a good time to take the field. We saw how rough City looked, not just with the loss of De Bruyne, but when they lost Rodri out from a red card suspension. They were dropping points to teams that were in the lower half of the table, and with the 4 goals that they just gave up against Chelsea, it kind of shows that maybe they're not the most solid at the back right now. Ederson has an injury; he's not going to Brazil to play this international break. Don't know how long that's going to last. But if they're going to be vulnerable at the back and, they're going to try to win games 3-2 like Klopp used to do, when he first came to Liverpool, it certainly opens up the possibility for them to start dropping points. And that might be where these other sides get the advantage.
Let me just put it into quick context. As of today, City is still the heavy favorite, minus 250. Arsenal plus 550. Liverpool plus 600. Tottenham plus 2,500. I think Liverpool at plus 600 or Arsenal at plus 550. Now's the time. Now is the time to strike.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. The last and perhaps most intriguing point here in the Premier League, all 3 newly promoted sides, Burnley, Sheffield United, Luton Town, all sitting in the relegation zone. The last time all 3 newly promoted sides were relegated the following season, you have to go back to 97-98. Bolton, Barnsley, Crystal Palace. Buy or sell, at least one of those 3 teams can secure safety and stay in the Premier League into 2024-25.
It's going to be tough, especially, Luton Town. It's a great story. Happy for them to make it this far. Surprisingly, they're the highest one out of the bottom 3, really. So if anyone has a chance, it might be them based on points, even though they're all separated only by 2. The good thing that might help them is the news that came out, I believe it was today, about Everton being stripped of 12 points and potentially going down to 2. That might be the best thing for one of them to be able to eke out. Now, do I think realistically, is it possible? Not really, even though Everton haven't played the most interesting style of football. Especially that's kind of expected with Sean Dyche. But I would it's hard. It really is. I'm gonna say no. I'm gonna say that they're all gonna go down. I don't think one of them is able to do it. Maybe if they get a good string of games and a team like Bournemouth is able to drop more, they're only separated by 3 points, while Luton Town in them. But I'm gonna say no. I think all 3 are going back down.
Yeah, I think the interesting point is kind of what you started with, which is Luton Town are of the 3 the ones that are closest to safety. I think going into this season, Nick, you and I kind of discussed in the season preview that Luton Town didn't come out and spend a lot of money to try to build up their squad like you see a lot of these newly promoted sides do. Nottingham Forest famously did it last season, where I think they brought in like 11 players. Luton Town were coming in this thing, we're going to build out our infrastructure. We're probably going to go back down, but we'll be better poised to make another return at some point in the next year or 2, and then we can kind of spend the money on the players and try to make a more manageable return to the Premier League. So the fact that they're sitting there at 18th, and Burnley, who I think was the club that Nick, you and I picked at being maybe the surprise coming up, based off of how well they performed the championship last season, led the championship
Losers
in
of
goals
5 straight.
scored. Losers of 5 straight. I made the moniker, not your father's Burnley, because they were actually scoring goals under Vincent Kompany, and it's actually for all the wrong reasons. They are the last place team in goals scored with just, I think, 9 goals on the season. They've conceded 30, which is very un-Burnley like. They've struggled the most out of anybody. And so if I were to, buy one of these clubs staying up, normally I would be doing it based off of the back of my expectations for Burnley, but I don't see it right now. And then the club that I haven't talked about, Sheffield United, has actually looked decent the last 2 matches. They drew last week, and they picked up a pretty big win against Wolves, I think, the week before. So maybe getting a little momentum there. Maybe they're the club to make the run here. So I think there's a lot of pressure maybe on Sheffield United to be the club that kind of holds that or breaks the trend and keeps the newly promoted sides up. But right now I don't see it, especially I guess, what you guys said is if Everton's losing points, then maybe that's the hope. But when you're looking at the table right now, they're 3 points back already. I think Bournemouth have been pretty bad, but I think they have, quality talent that can turn it around. They've got a good striker in Solanke. So then after that, Fulham at 12 points, Nottingham Forest at 13. It gets a little tricky. So I think I'm gonna sell it right now because it's tough to see who would slot in. And realistically, the only one that I think has a chance based off of recent form would be Sheffield United, and I don't love them as a squad.
Yeah, make it a straight sell. I'm selling this as well. I think even if Everton get that, deducted points, they still already have 4 wins in 12 matches. I mean, I'm trying to think of how long it took them to get 4 wins last year. So they've looked better. If they were to go down to 2 points, they're still only 2 wins away from potentially, being in 17th place. So it's not that bad. I think, like you said, Bournemouth's been good. They won 2 of their last 3 games, so they have a little bit of hope. I don't see it for any of the other teams. I mean, especially Sheffield and Burnley, they're both minus 21 goal differential. I mean, that's going to be really tough to turn around. I don't see any hope. So can Luton Town do it? Maybe. But it's going to take an awful lot. 1 win out of 12 matches. Bournemouth only has 2 wins, but I don't know. I just think that experience as we get into March, April, May, that's what's going to set Bournemouth apart and probably keep them safe in this instance.
Yeah, and it also helps that a lot of those players have Premier League experience, and they're prepared to kind of, when they get into the relegation battle, like they know what it's going to take to keep them up. And you can ask Everton fans how important that is, because Everton have been very close to going down the last 2 seasons, and they've managed to scrape together, the 5 or 6 points needed in April to kind of keep them above the water. So, yeah, I think it's tough. One of these clubs are gonna have to get really hot, or they're gonna have to make like a surprise move in January to bring in like the stud midfielder that kind of anchors things. And I don't see it. I certainly don't see it from Luton Town. I think their plan has been pretty clear. And Burnley, I just think they're too far adrift right now. It just doesn't make sense.
For sure. All right. Any closing thoughts on the Premier League before we move over?
No, I mean, I think it's been a great season so far. I mean, we're about a third of the way in now. So we'll get into the meat of the season now, where you get that holiday period. You start getting the fixtures getting a little tighter together, and hopefully start to see some separation at the top, a little bit like Serie A. So maybe that's my segue there.
Yeah, let's get into it. As I mentioned, my boy Gianni here does have depth of football knowledge, but this is where he makes his bread and butter. So excited to get into Serie A. I'm going to start out with his team and maybe the fiercest rival, a team that we are very hard on here on Kicks and Picks. We also praise them when they deserve it. Inter and Juve, after 12 weeks, are now the top 2 squads in the league. They've separated themselves. I think a big matchup coming up relatively soon, right after this international break. Juve, somewhat in the midst of a drought, right? They haven't won a Scudetto since the 1920 season, so 9 consecutive before that. Inter looking to add that second star. The real question here is buy or sell. Juve can find themselves back on top.
Listen, this is completely unbiased, although it may come off as biased, but I'm selling it. Allegri, he can get all the lucky wins he wants. You can't do it against the big boys in Serie A. It's easy to get away with it against the Salernitanas and the Empolis and the Genoas of the league. But when you're going up against a team like Inter in the form that we are currently in, you can't just sit back and have only 15% possession, 20% possession, and expect to come away with 3 points. Now, is it possible they get a draw? Absolutely. I mean, they are very organized at the back. Bremer is playing as one of the, if not the best defender in Serie A, but I just don't see them really with the firepower they have in front. You know, Chiesa can't stay healthy. Moise Keane sometimes has to lead the line. Vlahovic has fallen out of favor, and even when he is on the pitch, he doesn't seem to have an impact.
Yep.
You know, I've said it with amongst friends. If he was on a team that gave him good, clear service, I think he would be back to scoring his 20, 25 goals in the league. So I just don't see it really like where are the wins going to come from against the top 6, 8 teams in the league, really? Like Bologna is not an easy team. I know those are your boys, but you saw how they played Inter down 2-0, came back and were able to equalize it. So you can't really you have to outscore teams. You have to put up 3 goals sometimes on teams in Serie A if you want to ensure a victory. It's such a competitive league from top to bottom. I just don't really see Juve. That doesn't mean that they're not going to. I think they'll be second or third at worst, but I don't see them winning the league.
All right.
Yeah,
Before, oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say I agree with everything, and I think the points are all valid, and I think if you're forced to pick a winner at this stage, like yeah, Inter makes sense. They have by far the best attack in the league. Their defense has been just as good. I think if I had to buy or sell, I would buy it right now purely because of the price. It seems like Juve, although 2 points off, are sitting around plus 300.
Yep.
And we talked about it last year, Nick. Like they just find ways to get results. And yeah, I know we just talked about maybe they're lucky, but it's Allegri at his finest. He finds ways to get 3 points. It can be frustrating at times. And all I need to know about Juve right now and how they're performing is how Nick treats Allegri on Twitter, because last
Yep.
season Nick was tweeting out the Allegri in a suit meme nonstop.
Oh yeah.
And now I think I just saw a tweet from Nick praising him and calling him the best manager in Italy. So
Yep.
I think that speaks volumes about where
Excuse
Juve
me?
are and what their prospects are.
Yeah, listen, I think it's true. It pains me to say he's not my favorite, but like in a time like this where I'm watching Maurizio Sarri in year 3 and all he does is complain, he doesn't change his tactics, he doesn't motivate players. And then I watch Allegri, who the calcio experts on Twitter bash week in, week out. All you hear is negative things about him. And here he is just racking up 3 points after 3 points. You know, you had a year last year where Juve went through a lot off the field. They're going through a lot, I guess, this year off the field. I haven't heard this guy complain once. It's like a breath of fresh air, quite honestly, compared to the Saudis, the Mourinho's of the world. So I have to give credit where it's due. I think he's getting an awful lot out of a squad that's okay. You mentioned Bremer. He's fantastic. Chesney is having a great year. We have to give him credit. I didn't rate him all that highly, but he's really playing well. And they're finding ways to score, right? They tried out a different lineup just about every week. So you have to give them credit where it's due. Scotty's point, I mean, plus 300 on them at this point in the season is good, but I will still sell it because I said it when we came on for the preview on InterViews. Inter is the best team. There's no doubt about it. They have the most depth. I think Inzaghi is the second best coach in the league. Loved him at Lazio. I'm upset we got rid of him. He's done a phenomenal job with Inter. Last year's Champions League final, that doesn't happen by mistake. I don't care what anybody says. And mentioned it, Lautaro Martinez, like this, he's finding it, right? Like he didn't come close to reaching his potential. He still might not be reaching his potential. This guy is everything you want in a forward. He's been there for what, 4 or 5 years now. I mean, consistency is everything. He's got a player now next to him, not the corpse of Dzeko or Correa or, Lukaku when he feels like playing or when he's not overweight. Like now Thuram playing with him, it's exactly the guy to complement him. So everything to me is falling into place. The only advantage Juve have is that they're playing once a week, right? They don't have that commitment. Inter's going to run into hard games in the Champions League. They already kind of have. The Coppa Italia is coming up. Obviously, they want to win the Scudetto. They still can, but this turned from a 2-horse race, me thinking it was Inter and Milan, to now a 2-horse race with Inter and Juventus. So I'm going to sell it. I still think Inter is the best team. I think they're the most equipped to do it, but you have to give Juve credit. It's just, if you're not giving them credit, you're just you just hate them. I think that's a fair thing to say.
Yeah, no, I'd have to agree. I mean, I'm definitely, I do give him credit. I mean, we talked about it actually on our Twitter space today, just how Allegri is getting a lot out of a team that's not very good. This isn't the team that he was coaching when he was winning, titles after titles with Juve. He doesn't have, the Vidals, the Pogba as well. He does have Pogba, but not that iteration of Pogba. No Pirlo's, I mean, he doesn't have really world class players except for maybe Bremer. You can make the case for Bremer being one.
Yep.
Um, injuries are piling up for that team. Now the stuff with Fagioli and the issues with Vlahovic, Kostic not playing really up to the expectations for sure. I mean,
Thanks.
you could see how Juve fans react whenever he plays over Cambiaso and stuff. It's not the best team. And I would agree with you that him only have to worry about one competition per week definitely makes it easier for them, for sure. But I also think that, with the way Inzaghi talked about the beginning of the year, the importance of getting that second star, upper management saying the same thing, ownership saying the same thing. I really think they're going to look at the Coppa Italia as a throwaway. They're going to just try to, throw out a bunch of kids against Bologna in that first round, and if they get through, whatever, they'll get through and they'll go. But if they lose, I don't think they really care. I mean, we won the Coppa Italia the last 2 times. Champions League, I don't think they're as focused. Not that they're not trying, but I think that they really are putting an emphasis on getting that second star. They see the window being perfect right now. And you can make the argument that, Inzaghi kind of threw away the last 2 years. Maybe 2 years ago, for sure, you could say that. Last season, Napoli was just, nobody was going to top Napoli no matter
Yep.
what, you did. So, although they do have just the one thing, I still think that Inter, like you said, the depth is there. Currently, you could say we have the best goalkeeper, the best midfielder,
Yes.
and the best forward. And I feel like when you have the best at those key areas, that can take you all the way. So, no disrespect to Juve. I just think that this is if Inter don't win, it's really of our own doing, not so much Juve doing anything truly that much better. Just having to focus on one thing, really.
Yeah, I agree. And it's one thing we brought up here a couple of times, because I agree with you. I think Sommer's been the most underrated signing maybe of the season, right? This guy is, to me, he's the best goalkeeper in the league. I absolutely agree. It's people were thinking it was going to be a downgrade. I'm glad that he's proving them wrong. Scotty and I have fond memories of him.
Proving
We
me
were in Las
right,
Vegas.
because
100%.
yeah,
Hey,
no,
gloat, dude.
I listen. I had somebody who you know very well attacking me because I said that Jan Sommer right now is already the second best goalkeeper in the league, and they got really upset because I did not mention Provedel, and I said it wasn't a shot against Provedel. It's just I know how good Jan Sommer is, and I mean, look at that. I mean, Magnan hasn't played up to his potential, and Sommer has been instrumental for us, making big saves in big moments. And he had maybe one howler. I forget now. It might have been against Bologna, if I'm not mistaken. But you know what? Like I think goalkeepers are allowed to do, have one mistake in their game. I mean, Andre Onana had a few when he was at Inter. Obviously, Man U fans can't stand him.
Yeah, it's got tons now.
Yeah, yeah. It's a lot harder when you don't have a good defensive line in front of you either. But that's for another day. But yeah, no. Summer's been a breath of fresh air for sure. I feel such a sense of calm with him in net, and I think that when you have a goalkeeper of that quality, it makes things a lot easier on the rest of your squad in general. So
Yeah, I agree. Like I was going to say, Scotty and I have fond memories of him. We were in Las Vegas during the Euros, and he took France out. He did the deed. So he's always got a special spot in our hearts after that game. So let's move on to the race for top four. It's typical Serie A over the past couple of years, tightly contested as ever. Currently, we have 6 clubs within 4 points of fourth place: Napoli, just suffered a loss to Empoli at home, fired Rudy Garcia. I can tell you that I'm looking at two people. The three of us were very critical of the hire. I think us and much of the world have been proven right. So the question here, buy or sell, Napoli will fail to qualify for Champions League the season after they win the Scudetto.
You want me to go
I
first?
mean, I'll go first.
Whoever wants it.
Go ahead.
I'll go first because I think I talked Nick into this point maybe an episode or two ago, and which means I'm going to buy this. I think that Napoli are really close to flirting with disaster. I know that in order for them to fall out, there's gonna have to be somebody below them that kind of goes on a run and has some consistent form, which almost never seems to happen in Serie A. So there's going to be ups and downs, but
True.
yeah, I mean, we just talked about Tottenham losing Son for January. We talked about Salah, leaving Liverpool, and now we get to talk about Osimhen leaving Napoli in January. So I think they're going to be in a tough spot for several months. We'll see what happens with Rudy Garcia and what they do in the manager position, moving forward. But yeah, it's a tough one for me because it just seems like they are closer to having the wheels fall off and them kind of capitulate a bit than it is for them to kind of put it back together and put in a good run of form. I mean, if they lose Kvara for an injury for any sort of duration time, it's going to be a really tough scene for them.
Yeah, look, they already made a new managerial hire with Walter Mazzarri. The guy hasn't been relevant since 2013. It's the last time he's actually taken a club to Champions League, and now you bring him in to kind of bring back some kind of magic. I don't think you could have had a worse hire given the circumstances. His style is antiquated. The game is like just blown past him. Not only is Osimhen going to be leaving in January, but you're also going to be losing Anguissa. That's another big guy in the midfield to be without. And my goodness, I just don't see them hanging on to Champions League football. I mean, it's already looked bad. I saw some sign. I love Jesper Lindstrom. I mean, anyone who saw me over the summer, I was pining for Inter to go after this guy, even though he doesn't really fit the system. He's more of an attacking midfielder and can play out in the wing, which is where Napoli been using him. I thought that he would be such an instrumental key player. Hasn't really had much of an impact there. That doesn't mean he won't. But right now, Rudy Garcia was relying on Politano, who was having a bit of a renaissance, and Raspadori was kind of bailing him out of games as well. But I just don't see. Now you're going to have to switch formations entirely. You're going to a back three. This team isn't built to play with a back three. God forbid they have an injury to a center back. Now you're relying on Jonathan and Leo Ostergaard possibly, and both of them. I said Jonathan. I'm meaning Juan Jesus. They're both equally as bad. That's probably why they were on the mind there. Yeah. But you have those guys in there. I mean, you're going to be struggling. And with the way the goalkeepers have looked, Meret hasn't been as sharp as he was last season. We had Golorius, Golini step in and listen, that's a wonder goal against him from Empoli. You can't really blame the keeper there. However, he's not the most confident goalkeeper himself. He's very weak in the air. Reactions aren't fantastic. So I just don't see this Napoli team hanging on. And, some people were saying it was the start of a dynasty, and this might have been the shortest run dynasty we'll ever see in Serie A. So.
Yeah, listen, it starts with the hire of Garcia, right? We talked about it. We all have said it now for months. I think this appointment of Mazzarri, to me, it's almost like you're punting the year, right? You couldn't get anybody else, and you're saying, okay, who can I hire that I know I don't have to commit to beyond this season, right? Because I'm going to make a big push for somebody else in the summer. Maybe somebody wants to come back or somebody wants to move up to a bigger club. And this was the guy that they could bring in. Now, if he's coming in to settle the locker room, to get happy vibes going, sure, that's fine. If he's coming in to expect to make a serious challenge for the league and stay in top four, he's going to have to prove a whole lot of people wrong, right? I don't think there's one person that I've seen, Napoli fan or otherwise, that's saying this is a good hire. So interested to see what happens there. You guys mentioned, right, Osimhen, he's been hurt. And he's going to go to AFCON, right? His goal at this point is to be healthy for AFCON. That's a disaster. Cavada's been still good, but I think he's being figured out a little bit. I mean, that was always going to happen. Politano, I have to give him credit, right? He's the Italian Lozano, but he's had a good year so far. I can't hate too much on him. Raspadori, he's okay. Same type of thing. Not my favorite player. The one that's interesting to me is Simeone, because this guy, pretty proven in Serie A. He's got some talent. I figured when Osimhen went down, he was going to just jump right into that starting spot. I don't know if he had pictures of Garcia's wife or what, but he never saw the field, right? He was getting like 5-10 minutes at the end of the game. So maybe that changes under Mazzarri. I'm not sure. But my big issue with Napoli falling out of the top four, because we have a clear three: Inter, Juve, Milan, right? They're locks for top four. I can't see any scenario where those three teams don't make it. Who do we trust to come in and take the spot? Is it Atalanta? Is it Fiorentina? Is it Roma? Is it Lazio? I can't buy any one of those teams. I mean, maybe Roma, and only because of the talent they have. I think Lukaku and Dybala start on any team in the league. But they have an injury crisis of their own. They're focused on winning the Conference League or Europa League, whatever league they're playing in right now. They can't get out of their own way week after week, right? They win a couple games, then they lose. They draw, they win. So I don't know. Fiorentina, to me, overrated. I think Italiano's overrated. So Atalanta kind of becomes that default team for me. They're only 1 point behind them, but they're the same old Atalanta, right? Until they prove to me that they're going to rattle off 3-4 wins in a row, or that they can beat a shitty team away at home, right, in front of their own fans, I can't really buy them either. So who's taking Napoli's spot? That's really where I'm struggling with this question.
Yeah, I think you're close. I mean, if I had to guess, I would say it's probably between Atalanta and Roma. I like Atalanta a bit more. I think Scamacca has been a lot better this season. Obviously, he struggled
Better
at
than I
West
thought he
Ham
would be.
last year.
Yeah.
So I think that's certainly helpful. I have a personal soft spot for Lookman because I think when he does play well, he looks like he's one of those like top wingers, but he's so inconsistent that he also has games where he's just invisible. So
But he's another guy that's going to miss a month, right? He's going to play for Nigeria.
Yep, it's true.
Oh, that's right.
So
Yeah.
I think it would be between those two. I mean, Coop Miners, I remember watching him at Euros and thinking that, is this really what the Dutch have to offer as like their starting midfielder? And he's been pretty strong this season. So, yeah, I'd probably pencil them in over Napoli, but.
So just to give you the odds, Napoli is minus 175 to make top four. Atalanta is plus 190. And then you have to go to plus 450 for Fiorentina, Roma, or Lazio. So still heavy favorites from the books to finish in that top four spot.
Is that before or after Mazzarri was hired? Or those is when
That's
those numbers
right
came?
now, live odds.
Right now,
Live
even
odds
with
we're looking at.
Mazzarri in.
Yep.
Maybe they know something I don't know. I don't know. I would feel pretty good about putting some money on Roma and Lazio then, to be quite honest, just because that's how little faith I have in Walter Mazzarri. Like, this guy's a disaster. Like, he got Cagliari relegated. Like, his tactics are just so terrible. And listen, somebody put it very well, and they said he's Antonio Conte in terms of attitude without the skill of managing his players. That's the best way you could put it. He will not inspire anybody. He will not come out with anything creative to help put his club in the best position to win. And it's just going to be, some good rah-rah. I'm going to talk bad about my players, throw them under the bus, hope it gets a reaction out of them, and it doesn't. And then you just continue to fail and drop points. So, listen, if he proves me wrong, I'll have no problem admitting I was wrong about Mazzarri. But
everybody,
until it's 10 years since he's actually been successful. I don't see.
Correct me if I'm wrong. He got Watford relegated too, right?
Yes, he did.
Or were they still?
I mean, everybody
got
Watford.
Sorry,
relegated.
he got fired before they got relegated, but they were already in the relegation zone when he was fired.
Yeah, Watford goes through managers every 6 months, so it's tough to pin it on any single manager.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, the last thing I'll say before we move on, I kind of agree with you, Gianni, and I say this a lot, and one of these days it's going to come true. I think the runway for Roma and Lazio is still in front of them, right? Like, we kind of know who Napoli are at this point. We know their limitations. We know what's held them back. You have Roma and Lazio who off to probably the worst start either team has had in the past 10 years, let's say. So could they make up a 4 or 5 point deficit? I think they could do that pretty quickly. Just have to prove it. So the last one, the early adopter of the Bologna bandwagon, my good friend here. So want to bring them into the conversation. Currently in 8th place, level on points with Roma, promoted 2015, bottom to mid-table club every season since. We always make the joke, right? 9th to 14th place. That's where home is. 9th place last year. The buy or sell, can they, for the first time since Sassuolo in 16-17, make that jump to a European qualification spot? First time, when I say Sassuolo, outside of the traditional 7 teams that have made it, or 8 teams, I guess, Atalanta. Can Bologna do it? Gianni, you've been on my side with this squad. Are you a believer?
I am 100% a believer in this squad. To my good friend Tony has given your coach, former Interista, Thiago Motta, the nickname Money Motta. Like that guy is just, he really has progressive style of football playing. He's got these guys playing fantastically. I love Lewis Ferguson. I love Posh. I love obviously your boy Orsolini, and just what these guys are able to do. And even Xerxes, I wasn't the biggest fan of Xerxes. I thought he was a very limited forward. Very like good in technical ability, not great in terms of finishing or even reading the pitch. Like I feel like sometimes he just wouldn't look up. He was one of those guys who would just be looking down at where the ball was at his feet. And I'd be like, my goodness, if you just picked your head up, you could find Orsolini running in, you could find somebody moving. But now he's looking a lot more confident. And I definitely think his link up play between him and Ricardo has been just fun to watch. Uh, maybe they need a reinforcement in January window. I would think maybe another midfielder, possibly a center back, I think, who could really be an imposing force back there. Skorupski, pretty solid goalkeeper. Nothing terrible, nothing great, but sometimes he can make saves that are like, I mean, there's 2 guys that as an Inter fan that of goalkeepers that I can't stand going up against because sometimes they play like prime Buffon, and one's Skorupski and the other is oh my gosh, and I just forgot his name from Sassuolo, but he always seems to play like just prime Buffon against us. Consigli, there we go.
Yep.
I could totally just see these guys being able to get in. I think, look what they did against Juve, look what they did against Milan, Inter so far. They don't back down from a challenge, and I just really could see them getting it, and not just in like a conference league. I could potentially, if they can get a good string of games in and just win, get max points, not just draw. Like you have to get like 3-4 wins in a row. I could see them getting into a Europa League spot because Mota is a difference maker, and he's going to get picked up by a bigger club after this season without a doubt because he's just that much of a difference maker.
Yeah, I mean, I'll buy it too. I can't beat anything that you've just said, but for me, usually what I like to see is the teams that can kind of go on those unbeaten runs. Point taken, though, they do have a handful of draws that are mixed in there, which is tough. But in Serie A, it's as long as you're in the mix, if you can keep those results coming and keep generating the points, it's going to keep you in the conversation. And then all it takes is that one stretch where you put 3 or 4 wins together, and that's usually enough. So. I mean, they lost Fiorentina last weekend. That was their first loss since the opening match, right, against Milan. So they can put together another string of 10 matches to get them into January and beyond. And I certainly think they'll be well in the conversation.
And that was a tough loss. It was a game that they controlled a lot of it. They had a couple of VAR decisions go against them, but I think you guys hit the nail on the head. Ferguson is outstanding. He's like an old school footballer to me, right? A little bit of that just genius that you love to see when he has the ball. Xerxes, to me, agree. I'm not his biggest fan. I don't think he could lead the line by himself. I don't think they necessarily expected Arnautovic to leave. I know they're lacking a little bit of depth up front behind him, but he has turned few chances into goals over in this unbeaten run. So you have to like that. Orsolini, everybody, my favorite player. I think this guy could change the game by himself. He's definitely seen the ball a lot less than he has in recent seasons. I know he started out the year with hamstring issues, so that hindered them a little bit. But they have a lot of guys that are not household names, and the fact that they can collectively come together doesn't seem to be really any egos on the team. I think Malta really has instilled that in them. You mentioned it. He's a difference maker. He's won every single place he's ever been. He obviously knows the Italian game inside and out. And this is like a big squad for him to get his real first chance. And he's, proving Joey Saputo right. So you'd love to see that. The guys that have been really unheralded to me are Gianni, the Greek defender, and Calafiori I think he came from Roma, if I'm not mistaken. These guys have been awesome in the back. So they're not giving up a lot of goals. And that really is the difference between, last year and this year. I think only 10 goals given up through 12 games. So less than a goal a game. If they're going to have any chance of doing it, I think that's the way. I think they're better than Monza. They're better than Torino. They're better than, a Frosinone, a Genoa, a Sassuolo. So I think the teams below them are not of concern. It's just going to come down to, what does Fiorentina do? What does Roma or Lazio or Atalanta do? If any of those teams fall under a bad streak, Bologna might be able to do it. And I think the lack of expectation on them really could be something that carries them into a seventh or, potentially even eighth place spot, depending on how many spots we get this year. I don't know. The coefficients are changing. So love it. Appreciate you riding this team and the wave with me.
Listen, I'm telling you, if in January they can maybe go to like Verona and raid for Josh Doig and maybe like a Thomas Henry, who's not like the most exciting striker, but he's great in the air and he's a good finisher. Like you get some reinforcements that way. I think they're a shoe in for top six, really.
Yeah, they need depth, 100%. I think it's a midfielder or two. It's definitely some forward depth. If they can find a stretch where they score some goals, they could definitely make a run. So Gianni, anything else you want to touch on in Serie A that we haven't brought up yet? Anything that surprises you? Anything that you were dead right about through 12 games that you want to brag about? Other than Sommer?
I think my biggest surprise would have to be Genoa. They were a team that I was pretty excited about. They have a lot of players that I personally like, especially when you think of like Gudmundsson and my personal favorite guy who I was hyping up for the Italian national team, Retegui.
Yep.
I mean, to see them right now sitting 13th after just being promoted, I think if they can get Retegui to be healthy, they have Ruslan Malinovsky, who's got a lethal left foot. If they can get everybody healthy and playing, the way they have been so far this season, I really like what Girardino's doing there. I did not expect him to be this good. When you think of guys who used to play for the national team and even from that 06 team, you look at how Cannavaro hasn't really done much outside of China. Filippo Inzaghi is just a mess no matter where he goes. And I think actually the only
Pirlo,
one from them
terrible.
who Pirlo, yep, I forgot about Pirlo being a mess too. Yes, terrible. I would have, if you would have told me those guys who would be your least likely to be successful, I probably would have said Girardino. But no, he's got them playing like a beautiful brand of football, and I really like what they're doing there, and I hope that they continue like this because listen, the Albert Gudmundsson is a guy who I think is going to attract the eyes of a lot of teams, not just Serie A. I think EPL teams will come looking for him. And Retegui, man, the guy is he reminds me so much of Mauro Icardi, just without the crazy wife to kind of ruin his career. The guy's a lethal finisher in the box. Like it's funny. We went for Arnautovic for 10 million. We could have got this guy for 12. It's infuriating when you think about it. Yes, he may not have had the opportunities at Inter that he has at Genoa, but to see what he's doing and what Girardino's doing there with those young players is beautiful. And I hope that they can finish in the top 10 because I think that'll be really exciting.
I definitely agree with you. I think Gudmundsson, to me, like that's classic. He'll be on like Brighton or Newcastle next year, right? Like one of those teams is coming and poaching this dude. There's no question about it. He's been awesome. Retegui, I couldn't agree more. I think if he is on a better team, he is a 20 goal scorer this year. Obviously injury hasn't helped him, but his reading of the game and his instincts are really, really fun to watch. And you mentioned it, man. Some of these young Italian coaches are starting to put their mark on the league. I think Monza is another team that, kind of expected them in that 13th, 14th, 15th place. They're battling with 17 points, right? They're level with Lazio. They're giving up less than a goal a game. It's been fun to watch, and Scotty will agree, right? We talked about it week in and week out for 2 years now. You don't know what you're going to get out of this league from week to week. Anytime you think a team is going to go on a little bit of a run, they're going to replicate the performance of last week, good or bad. They do the opposite. So it's the most volatile league to bet, but it's definitely the most fun league to bet, along the way. Scott, I thought you were going to agree with me there. That was like my.
I mean, I do agree with you. I mean,
yeah.
No, I do agree. I'm making sure the Serie A experts have their say before I chime in with my very mediocre analysis. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely the league where like you can watch, anybody in the bottom half of the table upset anybody that's currently sitting in the top four, and it really, not that it just doesn't surprise you that much. Like you see, and you're like, yeah, it's one of those matches, and that's why we talked about it with that race for the top four with Napoli, and there's 7 some odd clubs that can sneak in. Like it really could be any one of them, because at the end of the day, like they're all going to be in the conversation probably up until April, and then you'll have the last few matches, or maybe 2 or 3 are the ones that are making the case for him. And it's usually the ones that just have been able to string together like those 2 or 3 win streaks against the lower clubs, or have pulled an upset of their own against an Inter or Juve, and that's the difference. So
sure. Gianni, gun to your head, is Italy going to qualify for Euro 2024?
Gosh, man.
We got
the Italian me
got
wants to say yes.
Have they played North Macedonia yet? Isn't that their big old like
that's their bugaboo
enemy?
Team.
Yeah, the bugaboo team.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah,
I think we drew one. We drew against them, right? Earlier in the, I don't even remember.
We did, yeah, earlier in qualification. So, oh man, we can't miss another tournament, right? Like we can't.
I don't know.
Right? Like, yeah, I don't know. It's so hard, man. It really is. Gun to my head, I'm going to say yes, we qualify. And then if you don't hear from me in 2024, then you know that they pull the trigger, because I was wrong. But
is it top 3 teams in their group, or top 2 that qualify?
Top two
qualify.
Yeah, I think third goes to a playoff.
We got
okay.
Yeah, but so we got the part-time bus drivers in North Macedonia, followed by Feelings FC in Ukraine. So it's gonna be tough.
I mean, it's gonna come down to that Ukraine match, really. I mean, assuming you can at least beat North Macedonia.
Well, Scott, you can reference my tweet on the projected starting lineup and the 4-3-3 that we're just going to keep going back to for 4 years. Yeah, had to. Gianni, thank you, dude, so much for coming on. Please let all the listeners know what it is you're up to. Your fantastic show. I didn't do it justice with my intro because I want you to talk about it, but show I've had the pleasure of being a guest on. Listen to weekly, not even an Inter fan. You guys make it so enjoyable. So please let everybody know what's going on.
No, man, I appreciate that. Yeah, no, Nick's definitely been our most invited guest. I mean, the people love when he comes on, and he'll give us our picks too, and gives a lot of good insights from an unbiased opinion. Whereas me and Alessandro can be a little biased sometimes. I mean, we are Inter fans after all. But yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at SauceGMP. And then on the podcast, it's InterViews_pod, but a 0 instead of the O. And yeah, I mean, if you want to, we're on every podcast platform, Spotify, Google Podcasts, even though I think that's going away, Apple Podcasts. Just look up InterViews podcast, and you'll see it. The logo is a throwback to the 93-94 Inter kit, which is like my all-time favorite away kit. It's beautiful. I'm trying to get my hands on an actual one, but yeah, no, I appreciate it, man. Appreciate the invite. I love what you guys do. Nick's won me some money in the past, so I mean, I'm glad I don't know the EPL as well as he does, because I would have listened to him full-heartedly last couple of weeks based on his picks. Yeah. But
don't do that.
No, in terms of everything else, man, the guy's fantastic. So yeah, thank you for the invite, bro.
Appreciate it, brother. Thank you, guys. That'll do it for this week. We will catch you all after the international break.